3 hours and 26 minutes. That's how long Killers of the Flower Moon is. This is the latest film from the greatest living director, Martin Scorsese. But even with names like Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio, the question still stands. Is this worth your time? And my answer is probably not going to be one you like. But before I tell you about whether it's worth it or not, let me tell you a very general synopsis of the film to see if it's more interesting or not to you. Very generally, it's about a man and his uncle who try to kill as many people as possible in a bold attempt to get as much money as possible.
I do love that money, sir.
For 3 hours, we watch these people make the absolute worst decisions because they view these people as less than. But here's the interesting part. The lead of this film, Leonardo DiCaprio, is probably its antagonist as well.
I was sent down from Washington, D.C. to see about these murders.
See, what about him?
See who's doing it.
Now, obviously, he's being puppeteered by his uncle, but he's still the one knowingly killing people, hiring other people to do murder for him, poisoning people, and attempting to commit fraud. He's just a bad guy. The character that Leonardo DiCaprio marries, her name is Molly. She is the one that is set to get everything from this oil company, from this family. One by one, they get picked off by him, his uncle, and his cohorts. She gets sicker and sicker and sicker. Now, this is described in the film as diabetes and insulin laced with something else, so she's being poisoned slowly, but this is also happening simultaneous to her tribe dying. She is the embodiment of the hardship these Native Americans were having.
I ought to kill these white men who killed my family.
It's really great and subtle stuff, much like the passage of time. Decades pass without telling the audience ever. It just trusts you to pay attention to get what's happening. But that doesn't quite answer the question of, is it actually worth seeing? So far, critics are loving it, fans are loving it, I really liked it, but the audience I sat with seemed to have mixed feelings. There was one girl on her phone the whole time. People were constantly going up and down the aisles, peeing, coming back, being bored. There's a guy that fell asleep. I was dead-ass tired, and I didn't even fall asleep. But it just seemed like a lot of people didn't quite connect with this. Again, getting on your phone in the middle of a dark theater is a pretty good indicator that that person did not enjoy this movie, which is the main reason why I think this movie is going to be crippled by expectations.
But they outsmarted everybody.
The land had oil on it.
More and more, we're seeing longer and longer films come out and being met with tons of praise and money. But in this case, this is a very, very long movie that I think was advertised poorly. Now, don't get me wrong, the trailers are great. The trailers are really, really great, and they really sell this movie as something it isn't.
This wealth should come to us. Their time is over.
I know it's not the movie's fault, but the trailer does not reflect the film in the slightest. I know this isn't explicitly answering the is it worth it question, but stick with me here. The trailer gives the film this sense of explosiveness, fast pacing, and grandeur, which it does have. The problem is, this intense 3-minute trailer is all footage that's stretched across 3.5 hours, meaning in between the explosive moments and epic set pieces, there's a lot of quiet moments. It felt like the whole world was ready for this to be the next Oppenheimer. Long, loud, and satisfying. But that just describes me. I'm not long or satisfying. Anyway, the fact remains, Killers of the Flower Moon is a victim of his expectations. Now, when you compare it to something like Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer is a movie that met expectations with its trailer, and where these two very much differ is not in the runtime, it's not in the performances, it's not in the filmmaking, it's in the editing. Scorsese seems far more confident in his visuals and vision for the film than the incredibly fast-paced editing employed by Nolan, which is naturally going to hold people better than one 5-minute unbroken take of Leo testifying on a witness stand. The Oppenheimer is edited so fast and non-linear, it's like watching a 3-hour trailer. It's impossible to distill a Scorsese movie, specifically a movie like this, into a 3-minute trailer because of how quiet and meditative a lot of it is. Try to get that into a 3-minute trailer. I bet you couldn't. So you have to ask yourself, if I've seen the trailer, how much does that trailer weigh in on my expectations for the film, and how much do my expectations for the film dictate whether I like it or not? If you watch the trailer for this and say, that looks good because of this, this, and this, then you probably aren't gonna like this because you're an animal, for one, but because it's not going to be like the trailer at all. Are you normal, or do you think a Rotten Tomatoes score dictates whether a movie's good or not? In order to find out if it's worth it, these are a few of the dumb questions you'll have to ask yourself before sitting down to take almost half of a work shift to watch a movie about Osage Indians being brutally murdered. Like I said, the film could be worth it, but it depends on you. So if that sounds cool to you, then it will absolutely be worth your 3.5 hours. See? I told you couldn't distill this movie into 3 minutes.